And good evening once again, everybody. Welcome to another Hoops HD Under the Radar video podcast, your source for everything about the non-major college basketball teams, the under the radar schools and conferences. I'm your host, Chad Sherwood, and joining me, as always, is the puppet himself, David Griggs. David, how are you tonight?
I'm doing great, Chad.
We just had you
Another
picture there for a
week,
second. Okay.
yeah,
Another week of what?
of college hoops.
Okay.
It's
Yeah, we're recording this here Thursday evening. We just had watched another one of those really, lousy, boring non-conference games between Iowa and Iowa State. It just, I
yeah,
don't know why they bother playing rivalry games. They should all play SWAC school, shouldn't they?
yeah, Chad. I know we just talked. Yeah, they should. I mean, this is bad. Speaking of other non-conference rivalry games, I know we talked about. Do we want to talk about anything before the show? And we moved on. Do we have a time for a 90-second Hoops HD report because we overlooked something in our last one, and that was the Providence Rhode Island game.
Well, if you want to talk about David, go ahead. I'll give you 90 seconds here.
Well, it was a great game at Rhode Island. That rivalry, it's really heated. It's another one of those non-conference games that feels like a conference game. You kind of wish you had more of those in November and December. And Providence again won in spectacular fashion. I'm beginning to wonder, like next year, it's every year. It's how is Rhode Island going to spectacularly lose this time?
It really seems that way in that rivalry. It's a great rivalry, and of course, the game we were just joking about, the Iowa State game, incredible comeback by Iowa State, down the entire game, and just hits the shot at with 7 seconds left to take the lead. Their first lead since I think it was 3-2, and
Yeah.
incredible game. And this is why these teams should be playing these rivalries. Hello, Missouri, Kansas. Hello, Pitt, West Virginia.
Texas A&M, Syracuse, UConn, Louisville, Memphis is back. Syracuse, Georgetown is back. We're starting to get some of them back, but I mean, for real. And how about some that weren't former conference rivalries, but would be instant? And I specifically two come to mind: Kansas, Wichita State, under the radar, Wichita State, and Cincinnati, Ohio State. That's another one. And then Syracuse, or I'm sorry, UConn, Boston College, under the radar, Boston College.
David, I was doing a little bit of research. Didn't get quite all the way there yet, but there's about half a dozen teams or so in D1 that don't play any in-state rivals. Most of them are teams that are the only team in their state, such as a Wyoming or a Minnesota or a Maine. Ohio State, there's 13 D1 schools in the state of Ohio. They play 0 of them during the regular season. That's disgusting.
Yeah, and for years they didn't play anybody under any circumstances. At least recently they started to play some of the MACs and Wright State and bye games. But I mean, no offense to Xavier Cincinnati, I think that will always be heated. But I think Cincinnati Ohio State as a basketball rivalry the temperature might not be as hot, but I think it would be bigger nationally than Xavier Cincinnati, and they don't play. And you look at Ohio State's arena, you look at Cincinnati's arena, it's empty, and and no one watches on TV. They would pack the place out if those two played.
David, what would happen if Ohio State played a game at Dayton?
It would be awesome.
I mean, yeah, but let's move on to the under the radar, which is the focus of our podcast tonight. Under the radar schools are teams outside of the major conferences, also outside of the leagues that we've designated as standard multi-bid leagues, the A10, the American, and the Mountain West as well. We're not going to cover those. We also don't include teams that are the top 25, Gonzaga, and we exempted out BYU because they're BYU and they deserve an exemption.
Right.
I think that's they have special rules for bracketing. They have special rules for under the radar. Everybody else is fair game right now. Wichita State is back under the radar after their slow start to the season. But David, I'd like to start things out before we run through all the conferences in alphabetical order as we normally do by focusing on one league. And I'd like to focus in on the Summit League tonight, a.k.a. Minnesota's favorite league.
Yes.
And so something pretty amazing happened this past week. The University of Minnesota, which had not lost a home non-conference game in over 5 years, lost back-to-back
largely because
games.
of who they've been playing.
That's true. But they thought they'd keep going by scheduling South Dakota, not South Dakota State, but first South Dakota,
Oof.
and they lose.
And they lost huge.
And then here comes South Dakota State. And they demolished them. So back-to-back losses, both Summit League teams for the state of South Dakota, knocking off Minnesota this week. And this South Dakota State team, David, now out to an 8-1 record with the win at Minnesota, a win at TCU, a win at a pretty good Illinois State team.
Yeah.
Only the one loss, which was interesting enough, at UMKC, which is a game they probably should have won as well.
Right. They won decisively at Minnesota. Illinois State, they faltered a little bit. I was kind of expecting them to have a big year. They've struggled, lost big at UAB over the weekend. But still, this is a solid profile they're putting together. But is it I think they're missing the one jump out. I don't think that they're in a position quite yet to land inside the bubble. And I don't know, essentially they would have to win out and get, it would have to be a situation where they only lost one or two more games the rest of the way, I think, to get the attention of the committee, which, I mean, could be done. But I don't know. What do you think? They don't have the big win. They don't have the impressive win on their profile.
They don't have the chance for that, really. Their toughest game left is at Texas Tech, besides their conference games. So they're not going to really get that chance, but they could put up such a gaudy record. I mean, if they could roll through this conference with North Dakota State being disappointing so far, with Western Illinois, I think it may have just been a fluke, that one win at Wisconsin. If they could run roughshod over this conference, make it and do what Murray State did, lose in the conference championship game, but not having, with only one loss or only two losses there, it's going to be real close.
Yeah, and this schedule is infinitely better than Murray State's last year. It's not NCAA tournament good, but it's not a bunch of sub-200 teams. They're not playing a Stephen F. Austin type schedule. I think it's better than what we saw Utah State typically play, and Utah State was typically right on the bubble. So I think this team can do it. It's just they have very, very razor-thin margin of error.
Right. And if you want to talk about another team, though, that we liked heading into the season that has been kind of disappointing, North Dakota State over here in the Summit League as well, did something almost inexcusable over last weekend, David, going down to Southern Miss and losing to what may be one of the worst teams in all of Division I.
Yeah, one of the worst. And then you start to look at them. Losing at Iowa State, that's not too alarming. Losing at Illinois, and against an Illinois team that wasn't at full strength and wasn't playing well at the time, and then losing to Southern Miss. And then you look at what they've done as far as wins, there's nothing there. This is really disappointing because of how good they were looking at the end of last year and how much they had coming back. I personally liked them to win this league. And they haven't shown it yet. They're nowhere near the bubble. They're nowhere near the NIT. And this is a team that I thought would contend for it.
And while we're on the Summit League, the team that we really haven't discussed at all yet this season, but sitting here at 8-2, is this Oral Roberts team, maybe really quietly, even by under the radar standards. Their two losses, South Carolina on the road, New Mexico on the road, and both New Mexico may not be great this year, but it's so difficult to win at New Mexico.
Yeah, and I think New Mexico only has but one loss, or maybe it's two, but they won at Tulsa. You have to sit up and take notice of that. Another one of those out-of-conference crosstown rivals. One at James Madison, who's been disappointing. We'll get to them a little bit later, but yeah, I guess we're just so used to Oral Roberts not being relevant that we kind of may have forgotten about them a little bit, but they're off to a really good start.
They are, and they, unlike South Dakota State, are going to have a couple of chances here to really come and become impressive. I mean, way over their heads coming up this weekend at Oklahoma. But they have a road test at LSU coming up December 19th. Very beatable LSU team from what we've seen so far this year.
Very beatable, so much so that you wonder, because I think it's important to remind the viewers that if you beat a team that's in the rankings at the time you beat them and they turn out to have a losing record or worse, you don't get credit for beating a ranked team, because essentially, like, you don't get credit for beating a team that everyone mistook for being better than what they were. You almost wonder if LSU is even going to warrant much credit at all.
I'm not ready to give up on LSU. I mean, that's not for this podcast, but We'll be
Yeah.
focusing on the SEC maybe come next Monday. But let's run through a few of these other conferences. Start back at the beginning in the America East, where Albany is still looking really good. I don't think we've had much change of opinion on them. But the big story out of the America East came from UMass Lowell, the one of the transitional teams in the same situation as our Grand Canyon Antelopes.
Yeah. They point. They won at Boston College.
Probably the biggest win in school history. I'd argue it is the biggest win in school history.
Yeah, it arguably was, and they followed that up tonight. Ooh, putrid.
They got pounded at home by Boston University tonight, which says even more, I think, about Boston College. Although it was a sick Boston College team, we'll put it that way, as in literally sick to their stomachs from the food poisoning incident there. But still, to go down and win at Boston College, they'll be talking about that game for years up in Lowell, I think.
Yeah, New Hampshire, again, I don't think we like them to finish at the top of the league, but very much improved over the course of the last 2 years. Wouldn't you say? I mean, their program is much, much healthier than it's been in my lifetime, I think.
Yeah, they had multiple years there where they were, I think it was before we initiated the Centenary Award, but they would have been winning the Centenary Award.
Right, yeah.
They had a great they got to host that game against Hartford in the America East Conference quarterfinals last year, that thrilling overtime victory. The place went nuts. Almost beat Albany in the semifinals last year, but it'd be nice to see them back hosting another America East Conference tournament game again up in New Hampshire there.
Yeah, and the way that it's looking, I realize we're not in the conference play yet, but it looks like they will be able to.
David, over in the Atlantic Sun, I think we maybe start to develop a pretty good non-conference rivalry, actually, between NJIT and St. Francis Brooklyn. They had a thrilling game, if you remember, last year.
Yeah.
It was the first home game after the Michigan victory. The place was going nuts there at NJIT. They just played tonight at Brooklyn, an overtime win by NJIT. Another great game between these two programs.
Yeah, and I think the series is up after this year. I'd like to see it renewed. It was for no other reason. It makes geographic sense. And the two teams are fun to watch. They're very similar as far as like the institution, their fan base, and athletic department wise. And I think that it is a unique atmosphere. I realize NJIT is getting a new arena, but there's something about seeing a game at St. Francis Brooklyn or NJIT that's just that electric in that kind of a venue.
Agreed. Let's move over to the Big Sky very briefly.
Okay. North Florida needs a big man.
Yeah. North Florida. I mean, North Florida is sitting there 6-4. I think that they, we're going to see when we get to conference play between them and NJIT. Should it be really interesting actually to see NJIT in these ASUN games this year?
Very much so. Yeah,
it's going to be fun. But over in the Big Sky, Sac State is sitting here at 6-2. By overall record, 2 games better than anybody else in the conference. With the win at Arizona State. And at the moment, if you ask me who's going to win the conference, you got to look at them.
Yeah, you really do. And, Montana last night, did you sit up I wasn't even really following the game that closely, but when I saw the score, it really made me sit up. Did Gonzaga have a bad night, or did Montana finally kick it in the gear and start playing the way that we thought they would back when the season
I'm going to honestly tell you, I did not get a chance to see the game other than take a quick look at it this morning. But I mean, Montana was right there the entire time. It was, and I believe it was about a 6 or 7 point lead at halftime. Then Montana cut it back, but Gonzaga did hold on for a 3-point victory. But maybe Montana's turning the corner finally. We've been pretty disappointed with them so far this year.
Right, and sometimes that can happen, and sometimes you get a couple games under your belt, you start to gel a little more. Sac State's paper, though, is way better than anyone else's. It's not bubble good by any stretch, but it's way better than anybody else in the league.
The Big South Conference has actually already started conference play, and we've got 2 teams sitting at 2-0 at the top of it in High Point and Winthrop, and these 2 teams may be there the whole season, actually. I really like this High Point team. If you haven't seen John Brown play yet, go watch him play. He's one of the best mid-major players out there.
Yeah, and I don't know why, without the bracket buster, they do this. We've inquired about it. I guess they just like to get one – They don't like the idea of starting conference play when the students aren't there. Is
Right.
that your best guess? So they do it. They go ahead and play one slate of games or one turn before the students leave. Then they finish up their out of conference games, and then that way you don't have your conference opener in front of no student. That's the best guess that I have.
Yeah, I think that's my understanding as well, because you play these games in early December. You have the student body there. If you play them
First week of January.
if you play them in between Christmas and New Year's, no one's going to be there.
Right.
Instead, they schedule. You mean, for example, look at High Point here. December 21st, they'll be at Bill and Mary. December 28th, they'll be playing Methodist at home. That's the game you schedule. If you're going to
Yeah.
play Methodist, which you should be playing anyhow, schedule
Right.
them at home.
Winthrop much improved when they were really struggling when Pat Kelsey took them over. He's got them as one of the better teams in the league. High Point also having a big year, like both of them. Coastal Carolina is struggling a little more than I expected to. Cliff Ellis's team.
Yeah, I mean, Coastal, one of the reasons I kind of liked them heading into the season a little bit was that they would have the advantage of playing the home court playing the conference tournament on their home court, since that's gone now.
Yeah.
The team is sitting here, while they've got 5 overall wins, 3 of them are against Grace Bible, Piedmont International, and North Carolina Wesleyan. So the only team of note that they've actually beaten is a home court win over Radford, who did beat Georgetown. So
Right.
actually, they beat College of Charleston, who beat LSU. So I guess they beat people that beat people, at least.
Right. Yeah.
Over in the Big West, David, is it time to start paying a little bit of attention here to the Hawaii team out there, or they still have not played anybody yet?
I think it's more the latter, but how can you not be paying attention to them? They're 6-1 now. Again, a lot of that has been at home against weak competition, as opposed to a school like Long Beach State, who is not playing at home against weak competition. I'm not as sold on them. I think that the bloated record is more indicative of their schedule than them. But yeah, I mean, as of now, they are 6-1.
Well, we'll find out. That's one team we will find out a lot about over the holidays, because they're going to be playing obviously in the Diamond Head Classic there that they host. Starting off with Northern Iowa, and there's several really good teams in that field.
Right. I really wish they would format this. I understand the component of Hawaii, how them being in the conference would make it hard to play campus sites all the way through, but I wish they would at least tinker with the idea of letting the first place team host the entire tournament, unless it was Hawaii. Then they would have to, and I know that that's grossly unfair to Hawaii, but I could understand not wanting to fly the whole conference out there.
I doubt the students would have a problem. The student athletes would have a problem with that, but I think that the coaching staff said it would have more issues.
But again, like Hawaii with a new coach, that you need to keep an eye on that. Long Beach State with a new roster after having lost so much, they've looked pretty good against some of that rough competition that they've been playing. Jim Les out at UC Davis. Again, he was fantastic year last year. Huge roster overturn. Can they keep it going? Lots of good storylines in this league, and it's a fun league. It's a fun league with horrible streaming and horrible graphics.
Yeah, one of the leagues that really needs to do something about their video streaming that has not is the Big West here. I will give a shout out to the America East, which did upgrade their video streaming during the off season. A couple other conferences did. The Big Sky did as well. Big West is not. So get on this, guys.
Right.
The Colonial is a conference I think we're going to be discussing a lot this year, although going into the season, we had about 4 or 5 teams that we really liked in this conference, and all of them have had some very questionable losses so far.
Yeah, Northeastern should be better than they are, but they're not. And I can't help but think that it's not that we misjudge them, it's that they're not playing up to their ceiling like they should be.
Right. They've lost at Miami, Ohio, at Detroit, at Western Michigan. Those are 3.
Yeah.
I mean, every good point they got for winning at Miami, I think, is gone now with those 3.
I think that it is. And that's the thing. I don't want to say the rules are different for Under the Radar, but the situation certainly is different. You need to get impressive wins that impress the committee, and you need to avoid bad losses. They have not done the latter.
Right. And then James Madison, a team we like heading the season, has a home loss to Tennessee Martin.
Yeah.
Even though they won at Richmond, you give that back when you lose at home to Tennessee Martin.
Yeah.
William and Mary lost the game to Howard. Still haven't figured that one out.
Yeah, and this was a William and Mary team that had played so well outside of that. I know that that Virginia beat them decisively, but there's no harm in that. I mean, that's not the kind of loss that's going to hurt your profile. But losing to Howard did, and this Wilmington team is 5-0, but they really haven't done anything yet. Charleston, who I thought would be not, I thought they'd be a lot closer to the centenary than they would be the NIT. 6-2
with the home win over LSU. Yeah. So we're going to keep an eye on this. I think it's going to be a really close conference race, but are we going to have an at-large bid? It's going to be, I think it's a long shot now at this point.
Yeah, one of the charismatic people like Bruiser Flint. I think you need that kind of charisma in the game of college basketball. He hasn't won enough since he's been at Drexel. I don't think he's been to a single NCAA tournament. At 1-6, is this it for Bruiser Flint?
That's a tough call. And being right outside of Philadelphia.
This is Drexel's coach, by the way.
I should be able to answer this easier. Yeah, Drexel has not been to the NCAA tournament since 1996. Yeah,
he's had some good teams that just missed it.
He's had some good teams. He might be one of these guys here that they just really like at Drexel. I mean, Drexel is kind of the sixth member of the Philadelphia Big Five, if you want to put it that way. And but it could be time here. Something might happen in the offseason if things don't get a little bit better as we go through the season here. But I wouldn't be surprised if he still has another year.
Okay. But yeah, with as much as he had coming back, I'm surprised that they're as bad as they are.
Over in Conference USA, David, it seems like every year right around this time we're talking Louisiana Tech, and here we are again. Although we did not expect to be talking about them this year, but
no,
they're now sitting here at 7-1 with a nice win at Ohio State and a home win over that. We got this is a good win. They beat UT Arlington.
They did, and I think they're going to get some credit for that. The way Arlington's been playing, we'll get to them here in a few minutes. But again, the loss at Memphis was a little disturbing. Not that losing at Memphis isn't forgivable, but it was just how badly they lost. But winning at Ohio State, and again, they don't have any really good wins other than those two, but they don't have any bad losses either. When you look at this conference, they've looked better than anyone else. Old Dominion, really disappointing. UAB, big win in their last game at Illinois State. Normally not an easy place to win, but other than that, kind of disappointing there. Is anybody in this conference, and it's been a while since we've seen one, can anyone land inside the bubble?
I don't know that anyone other than La Tech has a shot to land inside the bubble. I'm not sure that La Tech is good enough to land inside the bubble themselves.
Yeah.
A team that I'm keeping an eye on here, though, I mentioned them last week also, this Middle Tennessee team. They won the Great Alaska Shootout. I mean, only beating Alaska, Anchorage, UNC Asheville, and Toledo to do that. Interesting game coming up this weekend, though. They're playing in Nashville against Auburn. I think it's a game they might have a shot at. I think that Auburn could be tested here. They've also got Belmont and South Dakota State coming up in the non-conference schedule still here the next few weeks. So they're going to have a couple of chances to make some marks.
Yeah, I'd like to applaud them for scheduling that game. Belmont is a neighbor of theirs. They didn't always – I think only recently they started playing regularly, though, but I think it is going to be a fixture game.
Good.
So good for them. And that's, again, like we always say, what you need to do if you're under the radar. You need to schedule other good under the radar teams if you can't get the power teams to play you on equal terms.
Over in the Horizon League, Valparaiso, if we're talking about teams that can get into the NCAA tournament with that large bid, even with two losses already, I think Valpo is right there. Yeah,
one of those losses was at Oregon, and they were right in that game. The other one is kind of, it is kind of a toe stub, losing at Ball State. But again, I don't. As long as they don't slip on any more banana peels, I think that they're fine. I would not be surprised if Valpo won out the rest of the way or only lost one more game. They had to sweat out their game last night. I was a little surprised. Was it at Indiana State?
It was at Indiana State. They've got trip to Chicago State coming up Friday night. They've got a trip to – they got to play Belmont for the second time this season at Belmont. That's probably their toughest game left on the entire schedule, including the Horizon League schedule. But they really can't have more than one slip up, because if they need an at-large bid, they're probably going to lose to a bad team in the Horizon League tournament. So that's going to be another bad mark on their schedule.
And by bad, I mean no one in the Horizon League. I know Milwaukee, big win last night against at Wisconsin. Milwaukee's ineligible for the tournament, though, right?
No, Milwaukee's eligible. They're back. Last year they were out because of APR, but they are back eligible.
Okay. Thank you for correcting that. 7-3. Their paper is all right. Other than that, and I don't expect them to hold on, although, I mean, we need to pay attention to them until it happens. But no one in this league is anywhere close to the NIT, much less the NCAA. So when you talk about avoiding bad losses, any loss is a damaging loss. And that's kind of a circumstantial disadvantage for a team like Valpo, who, if they had more shots at quality wins, they'd probably get more. But yeah, they need to avoid bad losses. But if they do that, I think they will be inside the bubble. And I think they're definitely good enough to do that.
Over in the Ivy League, and I know our colleague Lee Del Vecchio brought this up on Monday night during our Hoops HD report. I think we may be poised for one of the most exciting Ivy League seasons we've had in a long time here. Princeton, Yale, Columbia, all have the talent there. Harvard, who we were kind of starting to write off, played a great game against Kansas. They were right in it for about 30 minutes or so.
Yeah.
So you can't quite write them off yet, even though Siani Chambers is out for the year.
Right. And it's been exciting in the sense that this conference has not had somebody run away with it the last few years, but they have had two teams sprint way ahead of everybody else.
Right.
And after the first turn of games, like after the first 7 or 8, it's down to a 2-horse race. This year, it could be a 4 or 5-horse race.
And the rules say that if there's a tie, no matter how many teams are tied, there will be a playoff. There was a 3-way playoff once. Who knows if we could have one again this year?
And I'm in favor of the conference tournament. I realize that the purists are not. The reason I am is because this part of the season needs to matter. And in the Ivy, I know you and I disagree a little on this, but there's no real huge incentive to land inside the bubble because you don't need to be, because there's no risk of losing in the conference tournament.
Yeah, I mean, it's never happened that the Ivy has put 2 teams in, but I mean, what you really would be looking at is, can you be good enough to be inside the bubble yet be in second place, which is something that happens in the ACC or the Atlantic 10. Could even happen in a conference like the Missouri Valley at times or the West Coast, but the Ivy is not up to that level.
Right.
Over in the Metro Atlantic,
oh boy,
we've been focusing so much on the Monmouth Hawks, and I'll be there Sunday afternoon for their home opener against Wagner. The place should be going nuts. Obviously, they had the disappointing loss at Canisius to open MAC play, did bounce back and beat Niagara, doing the same thing as the Big South, stepping out a few conference games and then back out of conference again here.
Yeah, the loss to Canisius, and again, Monmouth is a team that we were viewing as an at-large caliber team, and under the radar or not, you have to critique them the same. The loss at Canisius is a bad loss. It will go down as a bad loss on their profile. I don't think Canisius is the kind of team that's going to be NIT or better. I don't think they're going to be close, actually. And it was kind of alarming, Chad, how bad their defense was in that game.
It was. Now, what I could say for them here is that their point guard, whose name just totally slipped my mind, the little guy. I'll get his name in a second. It just completely slipped my mind here. Justin Robinson. He got in foul trouble early in the first half. He missed most of the first half, picked up his 3rd foul early in the second. He probably played half the game, if not less, and they just were a different team without him on the floor.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I think that's why they lost the game. Now, maybe King Ray should have played him more, despite the fact that he had the fouls on him, just because of how bad they looked when he was out of the game. But I think that's what happened here.
Right, and this does not crush them, but it does set them back. And any loss would. They still have more good on their profile than bad. If they avoid bad losses the rest of the way, I do think they'll get in, and that means avoiding pretty much all conference losses, aside from maybe 1 or 2 on the road. And, of course, if their big game against Georgetown, if they're able to win that, they're in phenomenal shape. But that was a bad loss. And again, when you are talking about landing inside the bubble, under the radar or not, that might be harsh. But yeah, you have to avoid bad losses.
Now, let's not forget about this Iona team. I think we've been talking so much about Monmouth that we almost are forgetting about them, but AJ English has been putting up some amazing numbers here in Iona, including 46 points against Fairfield, 31 points against Tulsa, along with 6 assists in that game. He had 8 assists in the Fairfield game. I mean, he's just an incredible player.
Yeah. Yeah, he is. And again, since losing badly in their first 2 games, they've won 3 out of their last 4. They're going to be a force to be reckoned with, and they will have some bad losses, and they will lose in some spectacular fashion. There will be at least one game where they have a 20-point lead in the second half that they managed to lose. What do we call that, Chad?
That is what's called Clusing,
yes.
Named after their head coach, Tim Klus, who has found a way to lose games that you just thought this team had completely wrapped up.
Yeah.
Despite having, I mean, his overall record, he's had some great teams and some great records there at Iona.
Oh yeah.
Don't want to, say that he's going to blow every game that his team has a lead in, but there's been some real head scratchers over the last few years.
Yes.
Over in the Mid-American Conference, David, I know we like the Central Michigan team heading into the season, but they've not been playing very well.
Not at all.
Someone you're looking at here besides them now?
Well, no one in particular, but when you look at this conference, you notice a lot of bloated records. This conference used to have teams, Miami, Ohio more than anyone, but Akron, Kent, that used to really step up and really go out on the road and play Big Ten, ACC, and they would pull off, there would be 1 or 2 teams that pulled off a big win or 2, but for the most part, they would interconference play, and then they wouldn't have the overall profiles to put them over the top. Now it seems to be the opposite. You notice a lot of bloated records here: 7-2 Bowling Green, 6-2 Akron, 6-2 Kent State, Northern Illinois 7-1, Ball State. Let's talk about them. They did have the win against Valpo, 7-2, but the problem is now their records are bloated with no meat, as opposed to before where their records were so with a little bit of meat. I don't think they're any better off doing this.
Yeah, I mean, the only team that's actually scheduled any meat is Buffalo, who's sitting there 4-5. So,
yeah,
I mean, they've played Duke, Iowa State, Old Dominion, St. Joe's already, but lost all those games.
Yeah, but Ball State is not a team I was excited about at all at the beginning of the year. They do have the win over Valpo, and they've looked pretty good. I watched them play earlier this week. They look pretty good.
They look pretty good. I'm also keeping an eye on this Akron team. Not that they have a huge win, other than they won at Arkansas, which is pretty good.
Yeah.
But they lost a close game at Green Bay. They got blown out by Villanova. They've won all the rest of their games. So keeping an eye on them also. But we'll see. It's probably looking like a one-bid MAC this year once again, though.
Yeah.
Over in the MEAC, where are we, David? Who do you like? Is there anybody to like?
I'm not all that excited about anyone.
The only team that is above 500 right now, we were just talking about bloated records. I guess there's 2 teams above 500. Hampton is 4-3. Howard is 6-4 with the William & Mary win. So keep an eye on this Howard team out down there in DC.
Yeah, Howard is, and I kind of do like them, and that was a big win over William and Mary.
Of course, they start out MEAC play. Another conference start early. They lost to North Carolina A&T, another one of the perennial worst teams in the country. So,
yeah,
you got to keep that in mind too.
But other than other than that win against William and Mary, this is looking like first 4-ish.
Yeah,
there just isn't anything on anybody's profile that indicates they're any better than that.
No. Missouri Valley Conference. Obviously, let's start with Wichita State with a really important win that they picked up this week over UNLV. I mean, desperately needing that victory.
Yeah, Van Fleet back, clearly a much better team with him. UNLV, had been playing very well coming into that game. I think Wichita will turn the corner and in the end be inside the bubble. They're not. Now, they might be a 10 seed instead of the 10th best team overall, which is where they started the season at. But I do think this is a tournament team. And, the committee has to take into account the games they lost without him.
Right. But I mean, when you look at it, besides the games they have in the Valley, and there's a couple pretty good teams in the Valley, non-conference, they've got a home game against Utah this weekend, obviously a huge game.
Yeah.
That's a trip to Seton Hall, who is probably not a very good team. Nevada and New Mexico State at home, and that's it. These next two games, Utah at home, Seton Hall on the road, are almost must-wins at this point.
They are, and again, this is not the Wichita State that we're used to seeing. They're probably not going to be wearing white. They're certainly not going to be a 1 seed or a protected seed. But I do think they will be inside the bubble simply because although they don't have a lot of huge meat on their schedule, I think their profile and their record and their numbers will be good enough to warrant being inside the bubble when it's all said and done.
I think we have two other teams that we definitely have to discuss here in the Valley. Yeah. That's this Evansville team and the Northern Iowa team. They are both looking like NCAA tournament caliber teams so far, I'd argue. Yeah,
Evansville for sure. 7-2. What did they do recently?
They did lose at Arkansas. A little disappointing that they would lose that game.
Yeah,
I think I can look past that more than some of the other losses we've talked about for some of these other teams.
Yeah, they were right in there with Providence, and they had been looking good. One at Murray State, which may not sound like a lot, but I mean Murray State, it's not the easiest place to win. Arkansas is not good, and they did not win there. And again, when you're talking about at-large, inside the bubble standards, you need to win those games.
Agreed. The other team, of course, Northern Iowa, obviously the huge home win over North Carolina. That's going to go a long way for them. Yeah. They've got the game coming up this weekend against Iowa State. That's in Des Moines. They've also got they also are going to be out in Hawaii for the Diamond Head Classic, so a lot of chances to pick up some quality wins. A trip to New Mexico coming up as well. Huge. Actually, that's this weekend. The Iowa State's the following weekend.
Yeah, and again, those games, that's in Des Moines, right? And I know they alternate. So Iowa will be Drake and Northern Iowa will be Iowa State. And I think Iowa State's way over their head. But again, if they can do some things out in the Diamond Head, if they can win at New Mexico, you're looking at a pretty solid profile. I think this conference can get 2.
Okay. Over the Northeast Conference, I think we're looking at another first 4 16 seed team here. I'm not that certain who's even that good. I'll get a first-hand look at Wagner coming up this weekend when I see them play at Monmouth. They're off to a 5-2 start, the best record in the conference at least.
And another team to keep your eye on, and again, it will get them consideration because of the Hoops HD nomination board rules. Central Connecticut State University, a candidate for the Centenary Award.
Yes, currently sitting there at number 351 overall, the worst team in the RPIs. Ken Palm has them at 348. He thinks a few teams are worse.
Okay, and again, the Centenary Award, although no Centenary team has ever made our field, every single year they've been in the discussion to the very end.
Yes, well, by winning the Centenary Award, in addition to the acclaim that you get from winning that, our mock committee here at Hoops HD, or I'm sorry, our real committee, because we know the NCAA has a mock committee who tries to match what we come up with and generally fails. The Centenary Award winner gets to remain on our under consideration board the entire time.
Yes, and again, like our survival board, they will be noted. We need to come up with a special notation for the Centenary winner.
I think we'll have to take care of that. Yes.
Yeah, we'll do that later on.
Over in the Ohio Valley Conference, even though they're sitting there at 6-4, we still think Belmont is the class of this conference. I think, at least I think they are.
I agree with that. They have, and again, by at-large caliber standards, they've been disappointing. By NCAA, at least Ohio Valley standards, I think they're the best team by far, and it's still the conference does. If they finish first, they buy into the semis, and with the tournament being in Nashville, they're still in pretty good shape.
They are. Murray State, I still think maybe end up being the second best team in the conference there, and they're going to try to get a little revenge because obviously Belmont ruined their season last year.
Yeah, keep an eye on Eastern Kentucky. I know they're 7-3. They looked pretty good against Kentucky the other night. And they played somebody else earlier in the year. I'm slipping. And they hung right with Western Kentucky too. So EKU, I don't think they're anywhere close to Belmont or Murray, but they're better than what I thought they'd be.
Over in the Patriot League, Army is now 7-2, and I'm starting to wonder, David, is this the year?
Yes, I think it is.
Whoa.
You know,
Mark it down, everybody. December 10th. David Griggs just picked Army to finally make the NCAA tournament.
oh no! I didn't realize. I thought I was saying this was the year they finished 500 and go to the CIT.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I still like Bucknell. I know they're 3-6. I realize that's garbage, but
I'll tell you, I think Army's the only team that I've seen that's looked decent at all in this conference. This is a conference that had a ton of parity last year. I think it's going to have a ton of parity again this year, and it's not good parity. It's we all stink parity, you know.
If Army finishes first and has home court advantage throughout the NCAA tournament, it will be a show you want to tape. It will be an atmosphere unlike anything you've ever seen. When the women's team won, it was the best court storming I've ever seen. Oh my God! Please let it happen.
Over in the SoCon, I think you and I still really like this Chattanooga team, sitting here at 6-2. But I think we've got to talk a little bit about this Mercer team as well.
Yeah, let's talk about both. Who first?
Let's talk Chattanooga first. What are your thoughts there?
Like them a lot. Notable wins against at Georgia, and I realize Georgia is off to a sluggish start. It's Mark Fox's MO. They were off to a sluggish start last year as well. I think Georgia will be there in the end, and they'll get some credit for that win. Winning at Illinois at a time where Illinois wasn't playing that well. The one game that crushed them was Louisiana Monroe, who's decent at home. That's not an easy game to win, but when you're talking bubble, that's the kind of game you have to win. They have a huge game coming up this weekend, Chad, at Dayton, and it's the kind of game that if they win it, they'll be in a position to be there if they can run away from the conference. And if they lose it, I think that is the kind of game that makes the difference between needing the automatic bid and not.
I'd agree with you. But again, this is another team that if they lose any games in conference or even in the conference tournament, it's going to be a bad loss.
Right.
Over here, this Mercer team sitting here at 8-1, but a very iffy 8-1. They've played one true road game so far. It was the one game that they lost.
Yeah.
They did win 3 games down in Nashville at that it was a round robin event that they participated in. Those were away from home, but they were neutral court games.
Mm-hmm.
But on the other hand, their next 3 games are at Auburn, against Arkansas, and that game is being played in Little Rock, and a game at Ohio State. So their 3 biggest non-conference games are their next 3. So we'll find out a lot about them.
And again, how good are those 3 teams? I'm not expecting them to win even one of them, much less all of them. But if they do, we'll see.
Over in the Southland Conference, I got to throw this out here. I know Stephen F. Austin, the disappointment and all that.
That's amazing. Citadel.
I'm sorry?
6-4. The Citadel is 6-4. That's incredible. Anyway, moving on.
The Citadel is 6-4, but with a Ken Palm of 327.
Yes.
Probably because they played a bunch of non-D1 schools. 3 of them, in fact. And they've also beaten Stetson and Georgia Southern, who both stink as well. But over in the Southland Conference, do we need to take a little bit of a look at this Texas A&M Corpus Christi team?
Yeah, I mean,
obviously you're at 6-2. 2 of them are non-D1s, but they won at Elon, which is for Southland Conference standards, not that bad of a win. They beat Furman, who's a decent team out of the SoCon on I guess I was actually at Elon, actually, so it was part of an event.
And they hung in with Texas for part of that game. I don't think anybody. I think the ceiling for this conference is a 15 seed, maybe a 14. But I've liked them as much as I've liked anyone else in this league, and that includes the horrendously disappointing SFA Lumberjacks.
Another team that's really disappointing. A team I thought would finish second in this conference, Northwestern State. Yet 2 nights ago, they hung in with Baylor almost the entire game.
They did.
And I don't know where that came from because this is a team that lost 80-64 to Louisiana Monroe, lost 99-97 to LSU Alexandria, suddenly hanging in there with Baylor.
Yeah. Who knows? But yeah, it's been disappointing across the board. SFA will probably run over the conference once they get into it, but all that really means is that they can beat sub 200 teams.
over in the SWAC, normally we are talking about this is another one of those 16 seed first four leagues. I'm not certain it is this year, David.
No, not if it's Southern.
Or Alabama. You've got Alabama and A&M still sitting here at 4-1. They've only played 5 games, but they've only lost one. Southern sitting here at 5-2.
About to get a big win if they hold on here. There's 5 minutes to go, and they're up by. They are up by 15. They just went up by 15 at Wyoming.
And I mean, Cal struggled at Wyoming. Wyoming took Cal to overtime last week. And this Southern team is really starting to look good.
I mean, I think they're inside the first 4, and I think they're above the 16 line based on what we're seeing. Nobody in the Northeast looks like this. Look at the Patriot League. It's probably a 16 seed. America East. They look better than anyone from those leagues.
When you want to talk about the SWAC here, if this win holds on, this will be the 8th D1 road win of the season by SWAC teams tonight. That's the best they've been. That's more than they've had in, I believe, at least the last 10 years. This has been one of the best SWAC seasons we have seen in a long time. And yet they've got 3 teams without a win still sitting at the bottom of their standings.
So, I mean, some of it is still the SWAC, but
we already discussed the Summit League at the top of the show, so let's skip right over them and over to the Sun Belt, where we've got 2 teams that obviously need a lot of discussion here. Arkansas Little Rock 7-0, Texas Arlington 8-2 with wins over Ohio State, win over Memphis, a great game that they just barely lost to Texas in overtime.
Yeah, and then the win at UTEP. And I think that they're going to get credit for that win. This is a team that is putting together the type of profile that will get them noticed by the committee.
Now, the problem I'll tell you, the problem here with Arlington is their non-conference schedule is basically done. They've got one non-conference game left. It's a non-D1 game. The rest of their schedule is conference games.
Yeah, and again, it's a very small margin for error. I think they get maybe 2 strikes prior to the conference tournament. If they have 5 losses, that's probably too many. But if they end the season, if they go into the conference tournament and they're 16-2 in this league, I think you have to take them.
You're talking about 18-2. It's a 20-game schedule.
18-2. I'm sorry. Yeah.
But 2 of those losses might be Little Rock. They have a couple slightly better chances. They have a game at DePaul and a game at Texas Tech left. So to try to boost the resume a little bit. Not that either of those are hugely notable wins, but they are road wins against power conference teams at least.
Yeah, and again, they've lifted some weight. I think that they've lifted as much as Arlington, even though it might not be the brand name. They win at Tulsa. We like this Tulsa team most of the time. Win at San Diego State, and they did not play at the baseball field. That was at San Diego State. And, those are 2 really good wins.
I also would not count out either one of these Louisiana schools, especially this Monroe school. We talked about how they already beat Chattanooga. They don't really have a really bad loss. Kent State, Houston, Minnesota. So that may be the other problem that Arlington and Little Rock have, are that there is going to be some competition here in the Sun Belt this year.
Right. And, I mean, is it a problem? Yes. But is it an opportunity, too? They're going to get some credit if they go to Lafayette and they go to Monroe and they win those games.
West Coast Conference, we're not going to talk Gonzaga, but I think we should start by talking a little bit of St. Mary's. Sitting here at 6-0, they're obviously got to get some attention because they're undefeated. They also have not left their home court yet.
Yeah, they have not left their home court. Now, they did pound Sanford, and they beat what I thought is a pretty good UC Irvine team, although I'm a little disappointed. But yeah, they've essentially beat up on sub-NIT teams at home. We don't really know much about them yet. And it raises the question, why the hell would you put together this kind of schedule?
Yeah, in fact, they are at Cal this weekend. That is their only non-conference road game. Then they got Cal Poly, Southern Utah at home. They also step out of Star Conference play December 21st, but they'll have a home game against Utah Valley. And the end of the season, March 1st, David, the home game against the Grand Canyon Antelopes.
Oh, yeah, and that's going to be huge. The Lopes, the team of the people. Big chance for the Lopes. We're going to get that waiver. We're going to get to them here in a minute, but we are fighting for this waiver, and this is the kind of win that will impress the selection committee.
And why don't we head right there, and let's see if we can pull something up here. But as you mentioned, David, over in the in the WAC, the last conference we have to discuss here. We have been campaigning all season to get the Grand Canyon Antelopes into the NCAA tournament, and it should be coming right up on my screen here.
Yeah.
Can we see it?
Yes, we can.
There it is. Shout out to Cox 7 in Arizona, who broadcast these Grand Canyon Antelopes game. They also stream them through their website, posting tweets at the bottom of the screen. And there you see my tweet right there on the screen the other night against Southern.
Yeah.
Hashtag Go Lopes. Hashtag Lopes Rising. Hashtag David.
Lopes waiver.
On TV, nationally broadcast.
Right. And we got to keep this going. Like, I mean, we will make this happen. Tweet at the NCAA. Call the NCAA. Lopes waiver. They deserve to be in it. Chad wrote an excellent article explaining why they deserve to be in it. And it essentially, all of them, the NCAA is essentially violating its own mission statement and values by keeping them out.
They really are. I mean, it is unfair to these kids, and it's unfair to the some of these other schools. UMass Lowell, if they were to win the tournament, Northern Kentucky is going to play in the Horizon League tournament this year.
Yeah.
They could win the Horizon League tournament and go to the CIT.
Right, and it is fundamentally it's fundamentally unfair. And if the idea is that they need to be acclimated to Division I, holy crap! Have you seen a Grand Canyon home game? That's more acclimated than this Wyoming game I've got on right now.
There are quite a few teams that are not even close to what Grand Canyon is that are eligible. It makes no sense to me. The hashtag Lopes waiver. But we ask this every week, David, if we cannot get the waiver, if something goes wrong here, who's the next best team in the WAC? And I want to throw out this UMKC team here.
You've liked them for a while. I still think it's New Mexico State, but what is it? Okay, sell me on UMKC.
Well, if you watch UMKC play, which I don't know if you have or not, but take a look at this kid, Martez Harrison, that plays for them. 25 points against South Dakota State, along with 6 assists. 24 points in the win against Tennessee Martin. I mean, he can play, he can score, and he's the type of leader that can lead a team to a conference tournament championship, which is obviously the only way they're going to get into the NCAA tournament.
Right. I still like New Mexico State, but not as much as I like the team of the people.
I agree with you. The team of the people is the best team in this conference. And we're going to keep working on it. Hashtag Lopes waiver. And let me throw one other thing out to you, David, here. We've been tweeting this at the NCAA. We've been trying to get them their waiver.
Yeah.
I mentioned this Northern Kentucky. The Horizon League has said, Northern Kentucky, even though you're not eligible either, you're still a transitional team. We'll let you play in our conference tournament.
Mm-hmm.
Why is the WAC letting Grand Canyon into the WAC tournament?
Well, they need to. In fact, Grand Canyon should be hosting the tournament because then some people would actually come to it.
So, did we start too big? Maybe we should have started with the WAC and worked our way up?
Maybe so.
So,
but we're going to start it.
I'm going to kind of throw this out there for everybody. Hashtag Lopes waiver. Start tweeting at the WAC also.
Yeah, absolutely. We need to.
We need to amend the WAC laws, WAC rules, get Grand Canyon in there. It's a 7-team tournament now. It doesn't even make any sense. Make a regular 8-team tournament.
Right. And it is in the WAC's best interest to allow Grand Canyon to represent the WAC if they win the tournament, because you want your best team in the tournament, which Grand Canyon is.
And you want your best team, yeah, exactly. And you want your best team in your conference tournament with a shot to win it, right?
Yes. It is in the WAC's best interest. It isn't even doing right by Grand Canyon, although it is. It's doing right by yourself. You need your best team in the tournament. No one, not even New Mexico State, has the fan base that Grand Canyon has. No one has as good of a team that Grand Canyon has. The difference between Grand Canyon and the rest of the league is that when Grand Canyon plays at home, people actually come. Lopes waiver.
Hashtag Lopes waiver. Tweet it out there, everybody. Let's move on. I want to highlight a few games that are coming up over the next week. Then we'll hit our top 10 real quick here. But it's a pretty slow day tomorrow night. There is a rivalry game, though, between North Dakota State and North Dakota coming up Friday night here.
Yeah, big rivalry. I mean, North Dakota State, we talked about them kind of being disappointing. North Dakota, I really thought they were going in the right direction a couple years ago, but they have really stalled. But again, this one should be fun. It always is.
A bunch of games coming up on Saturday. We talked about that St. Mary's at Cal game and the Chattanooga at Dayton game already. Interesting game. NJIT is at Columbia coming up on Saturday. Two teams that we picked near the top of their conferences.
Yeah.
Another game, another rivalry game here. Albany at Siena, going right across town.
Yeah, that one's usually pretty good. Now, that is always at that game at Siena. I know they split the tickets down the middle, but
it's always at the Time Warner. There in Albany, but it's on, which is Siena's home court.
Right, but they alternate who is the home team each year. So, and that's more of just a facilities issue. Albany, it's the demand for tickets would outweigh the supply if they ever played it at all.
We mentioned the Northern Iowa at New Mexico game coming up. That UC Irvine team is at Utah State. Two fairly disappointing teams so far, but Irvine could possibly pick up a big win there.
Mm-hmm.
Coming up on Sunday, we already mentioned that Monmouth game. South Dakota State's going to be hosting UC Santa Barbara, who has not been quite as good as they've been in past years this year.
Right, and South Dakota State, they've got something going. They've given themselves a chance.
Murray State, the second best team in the OVC, is going to be at an Illinois State team that's pretty decent.
Yeah, or should be, but hasn't been.
Grand Canyon, the team of the people in action Sunday night, hosting a team that just finished its transition in Nebraska Omaha. So
that's interesting. I think they're going to win that one.
And this is definitely an under the radar game, David. Who is going to lose this game is the question. Maine at Boston College.
Oh, please. Come on, Black Bears. Oh, Black Bears.
Coming up on, there's really not much of anything in terms of even a notable under-the-radar game coming up on Monday. I don't even know that I can point to a single game there. Cal Poly at St. Mary's maybe. But coming up Tuesday, we mentioned that Monmouth at Georgetown game. Southern is at Memphis, and could the Jaguars do it again?
Possibly. It appears that they have this game at Wyoming in hand. I hope they don't blow it. But, I mean, if they get that win at Memphis, you're talking about not getting on the bubble, but getting the kind of opponent that is somewhat manageable in the round of 64.
Yeah, you could be. I mean, you could be talking about 13 line at that point. Another game late Tuesday night, UC Irvine is at Oregon. Also the team of the people back in action again, hosting Delaware State on Tuesday night. Finally, quickly through Wednesday of next week, a rivalry game here, Old Dominion at Richmond.
Yeah, that's a big one. Love that rivalry.
And a game between another team in the SWAC that we haven't heard anything of from this year, Texas Southern. They're going to be at Iona. So Mike Davis versus Tim Cluse. I know two of your favorite coaches, David.
Oh, absolutely. Love them both. I think Cluse has that one.
We've got South Dakota State's on the road at Texas Tech.
That's a big one. I think South Dakota State wins that one.
A Front Range game. We love the Front Range Denver at Northern Colorado.
Yeah, we love the Front Range. Denver off to a fairly decent start. Northern Colorado, not so much.
And also round 2 of New Mexico State at New Mexico is coming up Wednesday night next week.
Yeah, that game's at the Pit. New Mexico State won the first one. New Mexico's just looked so much better. Yeah.
Alabama A&M also at Western Kentucky. That's the other team that's off to a good start there in the SWAC. So keep an eye on that game as well coming up Wednesday night.
Yeah.
But let's get right to our top 10s.
Yeah.
David, I'm going to run down my top 3 here. You let me know what you think of them and who you have there. Number 1, I've got the Valparaiso Crusaders. Number 2, that South Dakota State team we talked about. And number 3, the undefeated Arkansas Little Rock Trojans.
I actually have Valpo number 1, and I don't even think it's close. I have Texas Arlington right in there at number 2 because of what they've done on paper, the brand names they've won. But essentially, outside of their season opener, their only loss was an overtime game at Texas. In a game where they led for most of it and really should have ended up winning. I just think they're that good. I have Little Rock at number 3, so pretty close there.
Yeah, I had Arlington team. I had them at 4. And then going in at 5, I had Evansville, and 6 Northern Iowa, a pair of Missouri Valley Conference teams.
Yeah, I ended up having I listed La Tech at number 4, but I actually still like Bill and Mary. I know that they have the one bad loss, but the win at NC State was really impressive. The very close loss at Dayton was pretty good. I like them, and then I have South Dakota State right behind that.
I actually had as my next two teams Bill and Mary and Louisiana Tech. So again, we have the same teams, just in different orders.
Yeah.
It sounds like. And at 9 and 10, I have Chattanooga and the Monmouth Hawks.
Yeah, I actually have Northern Iowa up at number 7. I still really like them. We'll see how good they are when they have this meet coming up. I have Chattanooga at number 8, Monmouth at number 9, who really, I mean, Monmouth's paper outside of that loss at Canisius is really good. And I realize that maybe Monmouth has proven themselves, but I was so discouraged with that Canisius game. It's like, is this an at-large caliber team, or is it a decent team by Metro Atlantic standards that beat a couple of at-large caliber teams?
Yeah.
And I don't know yet, but they really, they if they win at Canisius, I think they're right up there around 2 or 3 on mine, but they didn't. And let's see, I had La Tech, I believe, down at 10, since I would have moved Evansville up.
I did throw out 4 honorable mentions. I think we have to give honorable mentions to both St. Mary's and UNC Wilmington just based on the fact that they're undefeated.
Yeah.
I also gave an honorable mention to the team of the people, to the Grand Canyon Antelopes. They would have been my team number 11. I just couldn't find a spot to squeeze them into my top 10, but they were right there. And I think we need to start, and maybe by next week we'll be putting them in there. We've got to start slowly sliding this Wichita State team into our discussions again.
Yeah, absolutely, because at the end of the day, I think that they have as good of a chance of ending up inside the bubble as anybody else. There's 2 teams, like I think the teams with the best shot at landing inside the bubble are Valpo and Wichita State. I like South Dakota State a lot. I just think that their margin for error is so slim that they won't be able to make it. Little Rock and Arlington, 2 really good teams, but again, small margin for error. Monmouth, it could still happen, but Chattanooga, it could still happen. But I'm guessing, and again, not to, I think we're going to see 3 under the radar teams in there, and then 2 of them will be Wichita, and 1 will be Valpo, and then another one will be another team from the Missouri Valley, probably Northern Iowa.
And I agree. And David, if you ask me who on this top 10 list is not going to be there at the end of the season, there's 2 teams I don't think we just discussed that will be anywhere near or under the radar top 10s. And those are Wichita and Valpo, because I expect them both to be top 25 teams at some point this season as we go ahead.
Yeah, I think
especially this Valpo team. I think they're just going to have one of those overall records as they start moving through Horizon League play that all the media is going to begin voting for them.
Yeah, I mean, it might take till mid to late January, but I do think it's going to happen.
But on that note, David, any other final thoughts for the evening?
Valpo, we've been giving them a lot of love. They deserve a lot of love, and they deserve fans at their games. Why aren't you filling your arena? You have an NCAA tournament caliber team, and you're probably on a collision court. You're probably on pace to land in the top 25. Start selling out your games.
In terms of selling out games, I was just taking a look today. They've almost a complete sellout now in this Monmouth-Wagner game coming up this weekend, but there are still tickets available. Buy them if you live anywhere in New Jersey or anywhere near New Jersey. It's going to be fun. It's going to be exciting. It's going to be crazy. That Monmouth bench is going to be going nuts. It's going to be a great time. I'll be there. And on that note, thanks for joining us, everybody, and we'll talk to you again real soon.